The Supreme Court heard oral arguments for a religious liberty case with major implications going forward. The case involves a mail carrier, Gerald Groff, with over a decade of experience delivering, as a mail carrier would, through rain, sleet, or snow. Initially, he sought a career with the Postal Service specifically because the job would allow him to honor the Sabbath. But while the Postal Service had a long-standing no mail on Sunday policy, that went out the door around a decade ago, partially due to demands from Amazon. Though Groff was often able to trade Sunday shifts with other employees, the Postal Service refused to provide him with religious accommodations and eventually booted him out. Well, join me now to share about this case, which the oral arguments were before the court yesterday, is Randall Wenger. He is the Chief Counsel of the Independence Law Center. He was Groff's first attorney and was present inside the Supreme Court during the arguments yesterday. Randall, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you're very accustomed to arguing these First Amendment religious freedom cases. What did I miss in setting this up? What other substantial facts do we need to know about the case of Groff?
Well, I think understanding Groff himself a little bit. At first, they gave him an accommodation. Before they refused to give him an accommodation, they allowed him to have off on Sundays. And the compromise was he was working everybody else's vacations. He was working Saturdays. He was working every holiday. He sometimes was working more than one shift a day. And it worked out.
Just so he could have off on Sabbath.
So that he could have
Give us
off
a little
for
bit of
Sabbath.
his faith background so we know this isn't a guy who was just, had a little chip on his shoulder and wanted to argue his faith was being violated.
Sure. This is a guy who grew up Mennonite in Lancaster County, as did I. And this is something that has always been part of his faith. And so
he specifically sought a job with the Postal Service because they don't work on Sundays.
Yeah, he came back from the mission field and he was looking for a job where he could honor his faith. And at that point, it was a
Chick-fil-A
perfect
wasn't
job.
up there. Huh?
Right. Yeah. And so it was a absolutely perfect job for him. And he was willing to accommodate the post office, but the post office wasn't willing to accommodate him.
But they did at first.
They did. They did. And what's interesting about that, it worked because as long as they were scheduling somebody else to be there, everything worked like clockwork. And you would expect that to happen when you're an employer the size of the post office. So we shouldn't be thinking, hey, how does this affect a mom and pop
Right.
with 10 employees? This is the United States Post Office.
So what happened?
Well, he ended up taking matters into his own hand after they said no. He shifted post offices to a very small branch office that wasn't delivering Amazon. He got himself another year out of that, but he needed to give up something to do that. He gave up his seniority. He was so close to having the seniority to get a different position, a position that never works Sundays. But the way that, and you know this, the way that religious conscience works, you can't just follow your conscience sometimes.
It's not something you
rather than others.
negotiate away.
Right. So he was willing to do the hard thing himself and basically set his career back so that he could follow his faith. And again, the post office accommodated him until they didn't. And eventually it came to a point where he was about to be terminated, and he left the post office looking for a new job.
Randall, I think this has far-reaching implications for religious freedom in this country because you should not have to check your faith at the door of this is a quasi-government agency. You're working for the government. You should not have to check your faith at the door.
Well, that's absolutely right, and we've known this for a long, long time in this country, which is why the Civil Rights Act, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which deals with employment, said we need to figure out ways to accommodate religious employees. And one of the things they were trying to accommodate specifically was Sabbath observance for those who observed a Saturday Sabbath.
That's been the history.
Yes.
That's changed. Why?
I think there's a callousness to religious faith as time goes on. And what's interesting to me, having done these kinds of cases before, I once represented an Orthodox Jewish police officer who wanted off from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And in that case, the police department was saying, Yeah, we don't care that he's willing to work Sundays. We need him to work Saturdays because everybody wants to have off on Saturdays. And what I make out of that is if there's a callousness to religion, you're just looking for any excuse
Right.
to not have
Right.
to accommodate. But as Americans, we accommodate all kinds of things.
Right.
Why can't we accommodate the most important thing to us, which is our religious faith?
Very quickly, about 30 seconds left. How'd the court arguments go, do you think?
We're very encouraged by the arguments, and the further into the arguments we got, the more empty the government's argument was becoming. So it looks like there's a majority of the court that is willing to breathe some life back into the Civil Rights Act so that religious employees can be protected in the workplace.
Will a decision go beyond your client's case?
Absolutely, because what we're looking to do is to correct a 45-year-old decision where what employers are supposed to do is reasonably accommodate unless there's an undue hardship, but that decision said reasonably accommodate unless there's more than the slightest level of difficulty.
10 seconds. When do you expect a decision?
Late June.
All right, very good. Randall, thanks for joining us, and thanks for fighting for religious freedom.
Well, and thank you.